My wife cheated, got pregnant by her boss, and tried to make me believe the baby was mine. I exposed her lies, filed for divorce, and reclaimed my life. Now, I'm focused on my kids and my freedom while she faces the consequences of her betrayal. Part 1. The birthday text. The day it all began was a perfect mix of joy and chaos. It was our daughter Ellie's 6th birthday, and the house was packed with family, laughter, and the smell of fresh-baked cupcakes. My wife, Sarah, was bustling around, ensuring every detail was perfect. She had this innate talent for making moments feel special, and I often found myself just watching her, utterly in awe. Later that afternoon, as Sarah showed me a picture on her phone of Ellie blowing out her candles, a text notification popped up. "I love you more." 2 hearts. I froze. It wasn't from me. "Who's that from?" I asked, keeping my tone light despite the unease gnawing at my gut. "Oh," Sarah replied quickly, her voice breezy. "That's just Alan, one of the guys at work. He's going through some stuff, and I've been helping him out." I wanted to press further, but with kids tugging at my legs and relatives all around, it didn't feel like the moment. I told myself it was nothing, just a friendly message. Sarah had always been a social butterfly, and people gravitated toward her for support. It was probably innocent, right? But that night, after the festivities wound down and the kids were finally asleep, Sarah said she needed to talk. Her face was pale, her hands fidgeting nervously. "What's going on?" I asked, the pit in my stomach returning. She hesitated, her eyes brimming with tears. "That text you saw earlier, it wasn't just a random coworker. It's someone I've been close to for 6 months. Time seemed to stop. I stared at her, waiting for her to laugh, to say it was some cruel joke. But the look on her face told me everything. And that's when she dropped the bombshell that would upend everything I thought I knew about our life together. Part 2. The confession. Sarah's words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to detonate. "I've been close to someone else," she said softly, her voice trembling but resolute. "Closer than I should be." "What do you mean, Sarah?" I asked, my voice shaking despite my effort to stay calm. She sank into the armchair across from me, her hands wringing the fabric of her sweater. "6 months ago, when you were struggling, remember how distant you were? How you seemed lost?" I remembered. It had been a rough patch for me, juggling work stress and trying to be a present father. But it wasn't a reason for this. "I met him at work," she continued. "Ellen. He was going through a tough time, and we started confiding in each other. At first, it was just emotional. But then, her voice broke. I clenched my fist, trying to keep control. Then what?" Sarah looked up, tears streaming down her face. "It became physical. A few times. I swear it didn't mean anything." I cut her off, my voice rising despite myself. "Didn't mean anything? You've been sleeping with him, and it doesn't mean anything." She shook her head, desperation etched in her expression. "I love you, not him. But I wasn't happy. I didn't feel seen. And then it happened, and I didn't know how to stop it." Every word she spoke felt like a knife to the chest. The woman I had shared a decade of my life with, the mother of my children, had been leading a double life. The house was silent except for her muffled sobs. My mind raced with questions, each more painful than the last. Finally, I found my voice. "What happens now, Sarah?" I asked, barely able to look at her. "Are you leaving me for him?" She shook her head vehemently. No. I ended it a month ago. I swear. I'm telling you now because I want us to move forward. I want to fix this." "Fix this?" I wasn't even sure where to begin processing it. And then she added something that made the ground shift beneath me. "There's one more thing you should know." "What now?" I asked, almost afraid of the answer. Sarah took a deep breath, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm pregnant." Part 3. The doubt. Pregnant. The words slammed into me like a freight train. I stared at Sarah, searching her face for any hint that this was some sick nightmare I'd eventually wake up from. "No," I whispered. "You're not serious." "I am," she said, her voice barely audible. "I found out last week." A cocktail of emotions surged through me. Rage, betrayal, confusion, but most of all, a crushing sense of heartbreak. This should have been a joyful moment, news to celebrate together. Instead, it felt like a cruel twist of fate. I gritted my teeth, forcing out the question that was tearing me apart. Is it mine? Sarah flinched as though I'd slapped her. Of course it is, she said quickly, too quickly. Of course. I shot back, my voice rising. You've been sleeping with him for months, and I'm just supposed to take your word for it. She looked stricken, but I wasn't done. Have you even thought about the possibility? Or were you planning to pretend no matter what? Her silence spoke louder than any denial could. She hadn't considered it. Or worse, she had and chose to keep me in the dark. I don't know, she finally admitted, her voice breaking. I was hoping it was yours. It has to be yours. Hoping. I laughed bitterly. Hoping is not knowing, Sarah. What if it's not? What then? Tears streamed down her face as she pleaded. Please don't let this destroy us. I made a mistake. A mistake. I cut her off. A mistake is forgetting to take out the trash. What you did was deliberate. Repeated. And now there's a baby involved. A baby that might not even be mine. She buried her face in her hands, her sobs shaking her shoulders. I'll do anything to fix this, she whispered. Anything. I wanted to walk out, to slam the door and never look back, but I couldn't. My kids were asleep upstairs, blissfully unaware that their world was on the verge of shattering. Finally, I spoke, my voice cold and measured. There's going to be a paternity test. If that baby isn't mine, I trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Sarah nodded, her tears soaking the front of her sweater. Okay, whatever you want. But even as she agreed, I couldn't shake the gnawing doubt. Had I ever really known her? Part 4, the test. The days leading up to the paternity test were the longest of my life. Every interaction with Sarah felt like walking on broken glass. We went through the motions for the kids, but beneath the surface, the tension was suffocating. Sarah tried to act normal, making breakfast, helping with homework, and planning Ellie's upcoming dance recital. But I could see the cracks in her facade. The nervous glances when she thought I wasn't looking. The way her hands trembled when she poured her coffee. I, on the other hand, had no interest in pretending. My sleep was non-existent, my mind racing with every worst-case scenario. What if the baby wasn't mine? What would that mean for us, for the kids? When the day of the test finally arrived, we drove to the clinic in silence. Sarah had insisted on coming with me, though I wasn't sure why. Maybe she wanted to prove she had nothing to hide, or maybe she just couldn't face waiting at home. The procedure itself was quick, just a simple cheek swab for me and a blood draw for her. The nurse assured us the results would be available in a few days, but it felt like an eternity. On the ride home, Sarah broke the silence. I know you don't believe me, she said quietly, staring out the window. But I really do want to fix this. I kept my eyes on the road. It's not about what you want, Sarah. It's about what's true. Her face crumpled, but she didn't say anything else. The waiting was agony. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart leapt into my throat. I couldn't focus at work, couldn't eat, couldn't think about anything else. The kids noticed something was off, but I didn't have the heart to tell them. Finally, the call came. I was at my desk when the clinic phoned with the results. My hands shook as I picked up, my voice barely steady enough to say hello. The nurse on the other end spoke calmly, as though she had no idea her words could change my life forever. Mr. Parker, the test confirms that you are the biological father. Relief hit me like a tidal wave, but it was immediately followed by anger. This wasn't a victory. It was a reprieve. That night, when I told Sarah the results, she broke down in tears. Thank you, she sobbed, as though I'd done her some kind of favor. But I wasn't in the mood for gratitude. This doesn't erase what you did, I said sharply. It just means the mess you made is slightly smaller. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I know, and I'll do whatever it takes to prove I'm worth forgiving. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe we could rebuild. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Because while the baby was mine, the trust we'd built over 10 years wasn't. Part 5. The Broken Mask. For a brief moment, the confirmation that the baby was mine felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders. But that relief quickly soured as the reality of our situation settled back in. It wasn't just about the baby. It was about Sarah's betrayal, the lies, and the fractured foundation of our marriage. I try to keep things civil, mostly for the kids' sake. Sarah, to her credit, was doing everything she could to prove she was serious about fixing our relationship. She suggested counseling, deleted Alan's number from her phone in front of me, and even offered to quit her job. But something still felt off. One night, as she slept beside me, I decided to look through her phone. I know it was an invasion of privacy, but after what she'd done, trust felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. What I found sent a cold shiver down my spine. Buried in her archived messages was a thread with Alan, one she'd clearly forgotten to delete. Most of it was old, from the early days of their affair, but one message stood out. I told him the baby is his. He bought it. Call me when you can. The date was from 2 days before the paternity test results came back. My vision blurred with rage as I scrolled through the rest of the thread. It was all there. Plans they'd made, things they'd done together, and even a joke Alan had made about me being too clueless to notice. I woke Sarah up, shoving the phone in her face. Care to explain this? I demanded, my voice trembling with fury. Her eyes widened as she read the messages, and for the first time, I saw a real panic in her expression. It's not what it looks like, she stammered. Don't you dare, I snapped. Don't you dare try to gaslight me right now. You told him you lied about the baby being mine. You told him I bought it. So what's the truth, Sarah? Are you still talking to him? She shook her head violently. No, I swear I haven't spoken to him since I ended it. That message, it was from before the test. I was scared, okay? I didn't know what to do. You didn't know what to do? I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. How about telling me the truth for once in your life? She started crying, but her tears didn't move me this time. Please, she begged. I'll prove to you I'm not lying. I'll take a polygraph if I have to. I laughed bitterly. A polygraph? Do you even hear yourself? This is how far you've dragged us down, me having to fact-check my wife like a criminal suspect. I stormed out of the bedroom and spent the night on the couch. As I lay there, staring at the ceiling, one thought consumed me. Even if the baby was mine, how could I ever look at Sarah the same way again? Part 6. The Fallout. The next morning, Sarah approached me cautiously, her face pale and drawn. We need to talk, she said softly. I sat across from her at the kitchen table, my arms crossed. Start talking. I want to fix this, she began, her voice trembling. I want us to work. I'll do whatever it takes. I laughed bitterly. You've said that before. And yet here we are. Another lie, another betrayal. I'll take the polygraph, she said again, as though it was some kind of grand gesture. Anything to prove I'm done with him. You don't get it, do you? I snapped. Even if you pass, the damage is already done. You plan to pass another man's baby off as mine. You kept secrets, lied to my face, and expected me to just roll over and take it. Her lip quivered, but I pressed on. Do you have any idea what you've put me through? What you've done to this family? I know, she whispered. And I hate myself for it. But I don't want to give up on us. Please. Her desperation was clear, but so was the hollowness in her words. I could see it now, the subtle way she deflected, the excuses she leaned on. She wasn't ready to own the full weight of what she'd done. That day, I started making plans. I met with a lawyer, wanting to know my rights. I had no intention of abandoning my kids, but I needed to protect myself. The lawyer's advice was blunt. Stay in the house, document everything, and don't make any rash decisions. So I stayed, but the tension between us grew unbearable. Every interaction felt like a performance. Her overcompensating with kindness, me struggling to hide my simmering resentment. Then, one evening, everything came to a head. I was in the living room when Sarah's phone buzzed on the coffee table. She was in the kitchen, so I glanced at the screen out of habit. It was a notification from Snapchat, a name I didn't recognize, Alan's username, cleverly disguised as something generic. My heart pounded as I grabbed the phone and opened the app. The message was already gone, but the notification was enough. When Sarah came back into the room, I held up the phone. Explain this, I demanded. Her face went white. It's nothing, she said quickly. Probably a spam account. Don't lie to me, I snapped. Not again. Is he still in your life? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. I stood up, my voice cold and steady. I'm done, Sarah. This marriage is over. Her eyes filled with tears. No, please. I've given you chance after chance. I interrupted. You chose this. You chose him. And now you have to live with the consequences. Her sobs echoed through the house as I walked away, my resolve hardening with every step. Part 7. The Reckoning. The moment I said, "This marriage is over," something shifted. It was as though the weight of everything, her lies, her betrayals, her half-hearted attempts at redemption, finally collapsed under its own gravity. Sarah's tears turned to pleading, but I had made up my mind. I stayed firm, meeting with my lawyer the next day to start the paperwork for divorce. Sarah, however, refused to accept it. She begged for couples counseling, claiming she'd cut all ties with Alan for good. But I wasn't about to fall for another performance. In the days that followed, I began quietly gathering evidence. If she wanted to fight me on custody or assets, I wasn't going to be caught unprepared. Her Snapchat activity, the archived messages I'd found, and even a few receipts I dug up from her work bag, all of it painted a damning picture of her ongoing deceit. The breaking point came when I received an unexpected call from Alan's wife. "I thought you should know," she said, her voice trembling. "Alan's been telling me things about your wife. They're still talking. He says she's been planning to leave you, that the baby might even be his." I felt my blood boil. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I've had enough," she admitted. "I'm leaving him, and I figured you deserved the truth before you made any decisions." That conversation was the final nail in the coffin. Any lingering doubts I had about divorcing Sarah evaporated. That night, I confronted her with everything. Alan's wife called me. I said, my voice calm, but icy. "She told me you've been planning to leave me, that you've been lying about cutting him off." Sarah's face crumpled. "It's not true," she insisted. "I swear, I'm done with him." "Don't bother," I interrupted. "You've had every opportunity to come clean, and you've chosen to keep lying. I'm filing for divorce, and you won't talk me out of it." Her tears flowed freely, but they no longer moved me. For months, I had carried the pain of her betrayal, questioning my own worth and sanity. But now, the anger and heartbreak were giving way to something new: clarity. As I walked away from her for the last time that night, I felt a strange sense of peace. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. I was done being a pawn in her game. Part 8. The Revenge. The weeks following my decision to file for divorce were a whirlwind of meetings with lawyers, carefully navigating conversations with the kids, and watching Sarah unravel as her web of lies collapsed. But amidst the chaos, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. Sarah's betrayal wasn't just personal. It was calculated, cruel, and reckless. And while I wasn't one for vindictive games, I realized that justice could have its own kind of poetry. Step 1 was securing my financial future. My lawyer was a shark, and with the evidence I'd gathered, including the messages, receipts, and even the testimony from Alan's wife, we ensured the divorce settlement was decidedly in my favor. The house would remain mine, and I'd get primary custody of the kids. Sarah would get visitation rights, but little else. Step 2 was professional. Remember, Alan was Sarah's boss, and their relationship had crossed into workplace territory. With Alan's wife backing me up, I sent a detailed account of their affair to his company's HR department, complete with dates, receipts, and screenshots of their texts. The fallout was immediate. Alan was fired, and Sarah's reputation at work was irreparably damaged. Step 3, though, was the most satisfying. The DNA test confirming the baby was mine had been a relief, but Sarah's attempts to manipulate that truth had left a sour taste. So I took matters into my own hands, crafting a heartfelt letter for our extended families. In it, I explained the situation, not in graphic detail, but enough for them to understand why the divorce was happening. I also made it clear that while I would always be civil for the sake of our children, I was no longer willing to shield Sarah from the consequences of her actions. When Sarah found out, she was livid. "You're trying to ruin me," she screamed one night after I dropped the kids off at her new apartment. "No, irraplia calmly. You did that all on your own. Months passed, and life began to stabilize. The kids adjusted surprisingly well to the new normal, and I threw myself into being the best father I could be. Slowly, I started to feel like myself again. As for Sarah, the fallout from her affair continued to haunt her. Her relationships with friends and family grew strained, and she struggled to hold down a steady job. Alan, true to form, moved on to another conquest, leaving her to pick up the pieces alone. One day, while dropping off the kids, she broke down. "I ruined everything," she sobbed. "I lost you. I lost us. And for what? Someone who didn't even care about me. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to." Her regret was punishment enough. As I drove away, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in months, maybe years, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was free.